Chapter 23. Flagstaff Manor. The group rushed down the hall in a frenzy, and jumped steps with each stride as they bounded down the stairs to the first floor. "There are men outside, but do not stop. Follow me," Damon yelled without turning back. Even as his words finished echoing, he threw open the large double doors and dashed straight through the group of 20 Talgathian guards. They all jumped out of the way as their superior officer ran right through them, but to their surprise, out poured 5 more, 3 women and 2 men. Some of the guards had drawn their weapons out of instinct, and a few ran after them, assuming their leader with the feathered hat was being pursued by assassins, but their efforts were half-hearted at best. Caleb kept close on his father's heels as they made their way as quickly as they could through the onlooking crowds, weaving in and out of the thicket of bodies, the others doing their best to follow. Damon stopped occasionally for a brief moment to consider before leading them in and out of carefully selected smaller streets, which he had clearly studied well, taking shortcuts to avoid the thicker clumps of people. They ran well into town, and at last Damon slowed to a stop some distance from the procession of Talgathians. Caleb was by his side seconds later, and the others followed behind him, panting and holding their knees. "It is as I suspected," Damon said. "She and her advisors will be staying at the mayor's residence, the Flagstaff Manor." Caleb looked up to see the manor further down the road. He had seen the spire atop its roof several times since they had arrived, but never the face of it. It was a large old building, though certainly not unsightly. It was tall and broad, with large wide stairs running up to a veranda, where rounded pillars supported an overhanging roof. Giant wooden doors with large stained-glass windows on either side of it adorned its face. The crowds of city folk had thinned here, but the line of soldiers protecting the queen was thicker than ever and pooled at the base of the stairs. Caleb could not help standing on his toes to see if he could catch another glimpse of the lioness as she approached. He could not find her. "Once she enters that building," Damon continued, "the defenses around it will be impenetrable. Now is our only chance to get inside if we are to divine her plans." "But how?" Layla asked between breaths. "Do not concern yourself about that," Damon responded. "I can get inside, but I must move now. The rest of you head back to the anchor, and stay in the rooms until you hear word from me." "Wait. I'm coming too, Father," Caleb said. "There is no knowing what could happen in there, and if anything goes ill, you will need my help." Damon looked like he was about to argue, but Layla stepped up too. "And that man I saw is going to be in there as well. I have to know who he is and what is going on." Both of the Rembrandts shot her looks of objection. She did not give them a chance. "And I can help. There are some places women can access more easily than men. And if a message must be sent, you can send me." They couldn't deny her logic, and Damon complied in haste. "Right. Any more than 3, and we will not be able to steal in at all." "Fine by me," Anselm said with his hands up. "I'm not the type to just stride into death traps." "Very well then," Damon said. "You 3 get back to the inn and get the horses packed and ready. We must be prepared to depart without a moment's delay if need calls for it." He gestured to Alastra, who had snatched up the red cloaks in the tower. "Put those back on," he instructed Caleb and Layla. "We will need them to get inside." "We will be amply prepared back at the inn," Alastra said, handing them over. "And be careful." The last she said, looking directly at Caleb. She turned to her brother. "Lead the way, Ansel." "I can't remember." Suddenly, clamor bustled through the crowds around them, and they all turned to see the procession of invaders rounding the corner into the plaza, heading toward the manor. Alastra waved and turned, Leothran following without a word. "Take care," Anselm said. "We'll expect to hear something soon, so don't take too long. Find out what you need to and get out of there with your hides." With that, he blended into the crowds after the women. "Quick!" Damon hastily whispered to Caleb and Layla. Caleb easily kept up with him, darting in and out of the empty pockets in the mass, and Layla held his arm to keep up. Damon led them back toward the oncoming procession, and right up to the backs of the red-cloaked soldiers forming the walled walkway. They waited there for the procession to pass by, and Damon pulled his cloak tight, ensuring that not a trace of his weapon was visible. Queen Tamara passed them by again, but she was partially blocked by the wall of metal that was Lord Marmius, so that they could not see her as well as before, despite her being less than 20 spans from them. Instead, Caleb's eyes fixed with hatred on the metal face of Marmius, and flashes of the Battle of Tritus returned. He was using Leothran. Almost made me kill her. Father should have run him through that night. I wonder what happened. I never asked him. In Tritus he said they had met before. Layla had her eyes fixed on the man with the pointed nose as he passed. She was squinting in thought, seemingly past the uneasiness of the mystery, and now had her heart set on solving it. Caleb was wondering what his father was planning, but understood as the enemy passed by and continued their march toward the manor. Minutes behind them marched the group of Shorewell officials, the mayor at their front and Julam the general bringing up the rear. Damon removed his feathered hat and tucked it away somewhere underneath his shroud, pulling the red hood up over his head. Caleb and Layla mimicked him. He shouldered through to the front of the wall of red cloaks and walked beside Julam's horse. Caleb and Layla followed as closely as they could. "It appears your duties have shifted of late," Damon said up to him. Julam's bald head turned and looked down angrily, his mouth under his thick moustache opening to scold, but he stopped when he saw Damon's face. After a pause of surprise, a small grin came to his lips. "So you finally show yourself," he said, bending down slightly from his steed to keep his words out of earshot of others. A few of the Talgathians grew suspicious when they had broken through, but as soon as Julam had begun talking, Caleb noticed them slip back into formation, assuming that it was something above themselves. "I knew you were in the city almost the moment you stepped through the gates," Julam continued. "I thought you were coming to pay me a visit, but it seems you have other business," he said with an even wider grin. "And you were right, old friend," Damon responded. "We need to get into the manor right away and learn of their plans. Surely none of you will be present at her meetings. We will be your ears." Julam sat up straight in his saddle and looked up ahead before quickly lowering himself again. "We approach the manor. Take my reins. The mayor and the rest of his council will go with the main party, but we can go around to the back entrance. No one will look twice if I am being led by 3 Talgathians. But we must act now." Damon nodded and followed orders. Julam straightened up and the grim look returned to his face. The mayor looked back as he noticed their conversation taking place. He frowned seeing his military leader being led elsewhere, but he did nothing, just looked forward again with slumped shoulders. Caleb shook his head. "These people really have given up. But hopefully the queen will depart soon. If we are lucky, she and her rabble will slink back to the Estelans where they belong." Julam muttered directions down to Damon as he broke off from the march and made his way to the left of the manor just before the stairs were upon them. Caleb dared to look back as inconspicuously as he could, and was grateful to see no suspicious eyes following them. The last image he saw before they went around the side of the building was the queen climbing the stairs with Marmius and turning to face her people, subdued triumph in her eyes. A roar of cheers followed. Once around back, Caleb found they were surrounded by soldiers of Shorewell, although they looked more like they were loitering than guarding anything. They all shifted uneasily at the sight of 3 red cloaks escorting their commander, but never dared more than to watch them out of the corner of their eyes. Julam dismounted and gave his reins to a nearby soldier. Damon removed his hood and Caleb and Layla followed suit. Julam looked at the 2 of them curiously. "This is my son Caleb," Damon said. "And his friend Layla Starlahand, also from Tritus." Julam bowed to them both. "The son of Damon Rembrandt," he said with approval. "Pleased to meet you, Caleb, and you, my lady Layla." He was a thick man with a gruff appearance, but his tone conveyed all the goodwill in the world. "So you are acquainted with my father then?" "Acquainted?" Julam laughed. "Indeed I am. Everyone in the Westerlands knows the name of Rembrandt. The slayer of the dark sage and restorer of peace. You have quite the legacy in your blood." Caleb nodded and forced a weak smile. "We met many years ago," Damon said. "But now is not the time for reminiscence. We must enter at once." Julam nodded. "With my help you can get in easily enough. Come, we haven't much time." They climbed a set of stairs that were perhaps only half of the width of the ones in the front, to tall glass doors being guarded by a group of armed men and gruels. Julam led them up the stairs, and when the guards crossed their halberds in front of his bulky chest, he used his authority and forced them out of the way. They entered a round, empty banquet room, and as soon as the doors closed behind them, Julam gained an added measure of haste. Flagstaff Manor will be swarming with those cretins from this point on, so keep those cloaks on and your weapons close. They will notice that I am absent soon, so I must be going to meet them at the front. But I will take you first to the council room, which I am sure they will commandeer to discuss their plots. I can also show you some other places of note. There is no telling where they will go or when they will hold their councils, but with some luck you may be able to get there before they do. Come. He led them across the polished floor, through the tall doors on the opposite side into the wide hall that encompassed much of the building's space, as if the whole manor was just a large hollow box. Caleb could see the front doors far on the other side, and beside them, staircases led up to a second level that ran all the way around the walls above them, the overlooking walkway being supported by pillars running down the hallway to Caleb's right and left side. He could see many doors upstairs that led off to the wings that branched from the main hall in which they stood. Similar doors lined the hallway on the first level as well. The whole place was spacious, and the ceiling high above their heads was lined with giant chandeliers covered in candles that were so out of reach that Caleb guessed they must require poles to light. It was a grand place to be sure, almost too grand for a building found in the middle of a port city like Shorewell. The lighting was appropriately dim and ominous for the guests it was about to house. Spots of sunlight filtered through the front door windows were distorted into odd colors on the floor by the images worked into the stained glass. A few servants were nervously running from door to door completing final preparations, and the rest were hiding or watching timidly from the windows. It was all too quiet. Caleb took all of the details in even as Julam spoke. "Hurry now," the old commander said. "They will come through that door any minute, and when they do, I must be there to fall back and assist the mayor. I will show you what you need to know, but the rest is up to you." He walked them briskly down the hall toward the front doors, explaining what was through each door as he went, the library and kitchen, the dining hall, and others. He pointed upstairs too, labeling most of the doors above them as bedrooms, but noted that at the far back was a small nook that rose yet a little more to where the mayor's chambers were. The Queen would be staying there. As they approached the front, they could hear the crowds cheering outside, and Julam stopped to listen before hastily finishing his tour. "The last thing you all need to know is the first door at the top of these stairs," he said, pointing up to the doors at the front corner of the building. "That is the council room. If you are truly foolish enough to eavesdrop, look to the rafters. They were built high so as to carry voices, and they are quite overshadowed. They may just be able to provide the cover you need, if you can manage to get up in time. And be careful, I believe there may be some red cloaks and servants in there already making ready for them." Damon had been listening the whole time at full attention, and now nodded at the conclusion of his friend's explanations. "Thank you, Julam," he said. "You worry about your own duties now and leave this to us." "Good luck to you all," he said with one final bow. He looked back at the front doors. "You had better get somewhere out of sight before they come in. May fate keep you in his hands." Julam tapped his forehead and made for the doors while Damon led Caleb and Layla quickly up the stairs toward the council room. "What should we do, Father?" Caleb asked. "There is no telling where any of them will go once they enter, or how many men will occupy the manor." "There will be many soldiers," he responded as they reached the second floor. "But the manor is the home of the mayor, and can only hold so many bodies. As for a plan, well, it may not be the safest answer, but our best choice may be to split up and meet again somewhere later. That way we can spread our ears and catch more information." "Are you sure?" Caleb asked. He knew it was a good idea, but naturally thought about Layla's safety. Evidently, she was aware. "I agree," she said to Damon. Their faces still showed worry, but she snuffed it out right away. "I will be all right. I can play a Talgathian soldier well enough." "Right," Damon said. "Caleb, you find a way into those rafters Julam mentioned in the council room. If you cannot find suitable cover, get out at once. There is no point dying here. I will stay wandering the main hall area." In case something goes ill at any time, we meet there. Caleb felt his feet tingle at the thought of eavesdropping on the Queen and her commanders, the thought of being so close to the lioness herself, but he of course accepted without a moment's pause. The safety of all of the Westerlands depended upon it. "And what about me?" Layla asked eagerly. Her eyes gleamed with determination from under her hood, and there wasn't a shred of fear in her voice. Her red hair poured out the side of the cowl, and she looked her strong and capable self. Caleb dwelled on her beauty for a moment. He pictured her walking the manor filled with Talgarth men and Gruuls, and started to doubt whether leaving her alone was a good idea or not. "Stay with me until all of them have entered," Damon said to her. "Once we can gauge how many there are and where they will be, we can discuss further." She seemed satisfied with the answer, and Caleb felt much better knowing that she would be protected at least some of the time. "Right then, you'd better be going," Damon said. "If you can find a place to hide, get there and stay put. I'll keep an eye on things, and if the Queen meets elsewhere, I will come and get you." Caleb and Layla embraced before they parted ways. "Be careful," she said, and the doors below burst open. In a second, Damon and Layla were running down the hall toward the back of the manor, out of sight until they could find their way back down to the lower level. Caleb had no choice but to slip into the doors to the council room and hope he would be alone.
Thank you for listening. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Episodes go live every Monday and Friday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The audiobook can be purchased in its entirety on Google Play Books. Get the whole trilogy now in both paperback and ebook formats. All links are in the description.